Hello everyone, my name is Zenitsu and I'm back with another Digimon deck profile video. So today I'm going to be taking a look at the Classic Collection, and the Classic Collection offers us lots of new and powerful cards to upgrade and iterate on some current and existing decks. And in today's video I'm going to be covering an updated version of the Bond of Friendship deck. So the Bond of Friendship deck is still a very powerful deck just because the style of gameplay is just, well, that good and can really be annoying for the opponent. So what the deck is trying to do at its core is it's a chip style deck where you're going to try to use your early to mid game to try to chip the opponent to put them in a particular security threshold, so that way you could just warp up into Bond and finish them off. So it's just a very strong and powerful deck at doing that, with a couple of different ways that we could play the deck, depending on the types of tech and tools you're going to be using. So this is going to be more of a Rookie Rush or Champion Rush style of deck, just because the new card from the Classic Collection wants to double down and incentivize that type of gameplay, rather than utilizing Ancients and Hybrids and kind of playing a sub-package within the deck to try to help act as an alternate win condition. But no matter which version of the deck you're going to be playing, it's still just a very strong deck at the end of the day, doing very similar things. But without further ado, onto the deck profile. Starting off with the Digitama, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Upamon, because Upamon is just the draw engine for the deck. It has a very generic and easy to trigger when attacking ability, where once per turn, if your opponent has a Digimon with no Digivolution sources in it in play, then you get to draw 1 card. So because we are more of a Rookie Rush-esque style of deck, where we're not going to be evolving a whole lot, we're going to be seldomly evolving, don't get me wrong, but it's not going to be the most common thing. We need alternate ways to try to draw cards to keep our hand as healthy as we possibly can and see our parts and pieces, and there's no better Digitama than Upamon. And then as far as the 5th Digitama of the deck goes, it could really be anything you want it to be if you even want to run a 5th Digitama. I'm choosing to run 1 copy of Demi-Vemon from the starter deck, just because this version of Demi-Vemon could help virtually all of our champions, and even some of our rookies. So what this card is doing is it has a nice inheritable ability where if we have 8 or more cards in our hands during our turn, then this Digimon gets plus 1000 DP, and because we're in blue, we have easy ways of trying to draw cards and maintain a healthy hand size, so that way we could actually utilize this ability on any of our Digimon, making our Digimon just a little bit stronger. Next, on to the rookies, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Gabumon. So this is the BT01 version of Gabumon, and we're only playing this card for 2 reasons. The first reason is, well, it's a Gabumon by name, so that way we could use him as a warp point to warp all the way up into our Bond of Friendship. And then the second big reason is the fact that it has an on-play ability to draw us a card, so that way we could hide a Digimon in Raising and still try to aggress and advance our board state without really losing any tempo. Next, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Gabumon. So this is the BT06 version of Gabumon, and this Gabumon is another fantastic Gabumon and probably the most important one in our rookie slots. So what this card is doing is it has 2 abilities. Its native ability is an all turns ability, where once per turn, when you play a Tamer with Mat Ishida in its name, then you get to gain 1 memory. So this card just makes playing our mats even cheaper than they normally would be, making them more tempo efficient to play, which is really good because we want to try to play our Tamers as efficiently as we possibly can. And then on top of that, it has a nice inheritable ability that's directly interacting with Bond of Friendship, where when attacking once per turn, if this Digimon has Gabumon Bond of Friendship in its name, then we get to unsuspend it, basically giving Bond of Friendship a extra attack, equating for him to have 3 attacks total thanks to this card, and that could be just a lot of damage all at once onto the opponent that they might not be expecting or they might not be able to stop. Next, I'm running 4 copies of Gabumon. So this is the Classic Collection version of Gabumon, and this is the card, as I mentioned before, that really wants to incentivize you playing this Champion Rush style of deck. So what this card is doing more specifically is it's a Gabumon by name, so again, another warp point for our Bond, and then on top of that, its inheritable ability is really good, where it's a when attacking once per turn, we get to reveal the top 3 cards of our deck, add 1 Tamer or 1 Digimon with Gabumon in its name among them into our hand, and place the rest on the bottom in any order. So essentially what this card is doing is it's digging for our bonds and it's digging for our Tamers, so that way we could try to play our Tamers to get up into our bonds, and that's really good and really important because we need to have our champions be as strong as we possibly can make them to recursively use this ability, so that way we could try to draw more cards and dig out our parts and pieces to combo off when we feel like we need to. So that's what's making this card super important and super powerful, and why we want to use it as a champion rush style of deck, because we want to try to get this ability off as quickly, early, and consistently and repetitively as we possibly can, because it's just digging out everything our deck already wants to be doing. Next, I'm going to be running 2 copies of Gabumon. So this is the promo Gabumon, and this promo version of Gabumon is really powerful because it's helping us dig out our Tamers. So it has an on-play ability similar to the BT01 Gabumon, where we get to reveal the top 5 cards of our deck, add 1 Tamer among them into our hand, and then the rest go to the bottom. So it's just trying to help us find our Tamers, so that way we could use our Tamers as efficiently as we possibly can to, well, be able to set up our bond and find our parts and pieces. So even though this Gabumon is still really good, it's not as good as it once was because we have the other Gabumon to try to help dig out our parts and pieces, but the fact that it's still a Gabumon that's looking for our Tamers makes it still a very desirable card. And then the last rookie of the deck is going to be 4 copies of Gabumon. So this is the starter deck version of Gabumon coming from the All-4 starter deck, and this Gabumon is really good at trying to DP boost our Digimon. So it has this really powerful inheritable ability where during all turns, not only just yours, but your opponent's as well, while you have 8 or more cards in your hand, then this Digimon gets plus 1000 DP. So it's just a very strong card to use in combination with the Demi-Vmon to try to give whatever Digimon we're using plus 2000 DP, so that way it could try to have a higher chance of success when it's attacking into the opponent's security or trying to pick off some of their Digimon. Next, on to the champions, I'm going to be running 2 copies of Gorillamon. So Gorillamon is just a vanilla card that we're utilizing just because for a level 4, it does have 6000 DP, which is slightly on the higher side compared to a lot of other champions in the game. And then on top of that, it evos for 1, so it's a card that we could digivolve into very tempo efficiently and start swinging with right away, making it just a very solid card for us to use. Next, I'm going to be running 3 copies of Lobomon. So Lobomon is going to be an alternate win condition for the deck just because hybrids win games. So what we're going to be doing with this card isn't necessarily just digivolving up into it at random. Most of the time we're trying to use this card to finish off the opponent to just have an extra attack when we need it, because he could digivolve on top of one of our Tamers, which we probably would have set up in a previous turn, so that way we could digivolve into Lobomon and swing for the game. So that's just what's making Lobomon a very powerful card, is the fact that we could use our Tamers to actually help aggress onto the opponent, and, well, no better card to do that with than Lobomon. Next, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Octomon. So Octomon is probably one of the most powerful level 4s that we have to be playing around with, just because for a level 4, he has 7000 DP. He evos for 2, but that's okay considering most of the time we're not digivolving past our champions. So it's a really good card to just digivolve up into and start swinging with right away, similar to Gorillamon. But the fact that Octomon is a little bit stronger means that he's going to have a higher chance of success when swinging into the opponent's security, so he's going to be the best level 4 that we could think about using to aggress onto the opponent with. Next, I'm going to be running 2 copies of Ikkakumon. So this is the Classic Collection version of Ikkakumon, and this card is another really powerful level 4 to be running. So it does have some stats very similar to Gorillamon, which is already pretty good because, as I mentioned before, Gorillamon stats are a little bit on the higher side when it comes to level 4 quality, but on top of the fact that it does have 6000 DP, making it a strong level 4, it also has this really good native ability to try to help us pick off the opponent's Digimon, because the ability states that during your turn, this Digimon can also attack the opponent's unsuspended Digimon with no Digivolution sources in it. So in the mirror, if they're just trying to hard play their rookies to try to digivolve or draw extra cards, then we could use a card like Ikkakumon to pick apart those cards and get rid of them off the field. So this is just a very powerful control type tool for the deck to be using as a result. And then the last champion of the deck is going to be 2 copies of Quadramon. So Quadramon is another very powerful Digimon for this deck to be running because it's a security Digimon on top of its on-play ability, allowing us to draw 2 cards. So if we really need to and we're stuck in, for whatever reason, we don't see a rookie, we're not necessarily afraid to hard play this card to try to draw our cards and to try to get us unstuck as quickly as we possibly can. But on top of that, the fact that it is a security Digimon means that it also is another security threat to try to aggress onto the opponent with. So if the opponent is just trying to swing into our security and they're trying to close out the game, then Quadramon could pop out, draw some extra cards, and act as an extra aggro point to try to close out the game with. So Quadramon being a security Digimon and helping us draw cards just makes it a very valuable card for this deck to be running. And then the last Digimon and only level 7 of the deck is going to be 4 copies of Gabumon Bond of Friendship. So Gabumon Bond of Friendship is an absolutely insane card and the linchpin and main powerhouse of what the deck is trying to do, because the whole point of the deck is to warp up into Bond and try to close out the game utilizing that warp. So what Bond is doing more specifically is he has 2 abilities. He has a first ability that triggers when he attacks once per turn. If we have a Tamer in play, then we could unsuspend this Digimon, allowing him to multi-attack. So if we pair that up with the BT06 Gabumon, then he essentially can attack a total of 3 times, which is really, really powerful and a lot of attacks to try to stop. And then on top of that, he also has another when attacking ability, not limited to once per turn, where you get to return one of the opponent's level 5 or lower Digimon to the bottom of their deck and trash all of their Digivolution sources. So this is just a very powerful control style ability to try to make sure that, well, the Gabumon can actually get his damage across, tucking those pesky blockers back to the bottom of the deck. And then the tuck ability is also really, really important and powerful because it could tuck a wide variety of different targets, and sometimes the opponent wants their Digimon to be deleted or bounce back to their hand, and the fact that this is denying them of both of those just make it a very powerful removal type of ability to be playing with that we could use multiple times thanks to his multiple attacks. Next, on to the options, I'm going to be running 2 copies of Ice Wall. So Ice Wall is an absolutely insane blue card to be running because it's one of the best blue defensive cards that we have in the game. So what this card is doing is it has the very powerful main ability where all of the opponent's Digimon gain the ability of, when attacking, losing 2 memory until the end of their next turn. So this is just really, really powerful at, well, walling the opponent out because it's essentially taxing their attacks and they might need to actually try to play cards instead of attack, and it really limits them on the options that they can take, all for 1 memory. And then on top of that, it has a powerful security ability of being able to gain 2 memory, acting very similar to a Hammer Spark in security, and that could also ruin some of the opponent's game plans by taking away essentially 2 of their memory, either ending their turn or putting them off their memory count. But speaking of Hammer Spark, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Hammer Spark. So Hammer Spark is still just a very powerful card for us to be utilizing just because of the fact that this card makes us memory and tempo efficient. So for the low play cost of 0, we get to gain 1 memory. So it's just a free memory whenever we feel like we need to. And then it has the security ability where we get to gain 2 memory. So that way we could essentially take away 2 memory from the opponent as a security threat. And as I mentioned before, that could be really disruptive for the opponent's game plan. And then the last option of the deck is going to be 2 copies of Cocytus Breath. So Cocytus Breath is just the big option removal card for the deck because we need to have some way to try to deal with the opponent's Digimon outside of what our Digimon are doing. So Cocytus Breath being a very powerful card to bounce any one of the opponent's Digimon back to their hand is just really, really strong. Yes, it is a little bit on the expensive side, but it's totally worth it when it's helping you win games. And it also is a very powerful security threat to be dealing with because it could also take away the opponent's lethal positions at times with the ability to activate its main to, well, bounce one of the opponent's Digimon back to their hand. So Cocytus Breath is just one of the better defensive security cards that we currently have, and that's kind of why we want to run it, because we do need some defense in our security. And then lastly, onto the Tamers, I'm going to be running 3 copies of Davis. So Davis is going to be acting as the deck's dedicated memory fixing Tamer, so if our memory is ever less than 3, he'll always hard set us to 3, and we need to be at 3 memory in order to consistently warp into Bond of Friendship, which is really, really good and the whole point of the deck. So that 3 memory is really important. And then on top of that, it has a nice on-play ability where it's just adding some extra consistency for the deck, where we get to reveal the top 3 cards of our deck and add 1 blue and 1 green Digimon among them into our hand, and then the rest go to the bottom. So we're not running any green Digimon, so at best it's going to add 1 blue Digimon back into our hand, which is really good because we get to pick and choose of the cards what we're trying to take and what we need to try to see. So it's just a really good card for us to be using all around because of that consistency ability on top of the memory fix ability. And then speaking of memory fixing and consistency, the last tamer of the deck is going to be 4 copies of Matt. So this is the BT06 version of Matt, and this is probably the best tamer that you could run because, well, this is what's making us warp and make our deck as dangerous as it possibly can. So what this card is doing is it has 2 abilities. The first ability is an ability that triggers during your turn, where when you move out a Gabumon or Gorillamon from your raising area, you'll get to draw a card and gain a memory. So this does stack, so the multiple mats that you do have, the more card draw and memory you'll gain when you literally raise out your Digimon, and that's really powerful just because, well, it makes us more memory efficient and it adds to the consistency, allowing us to see multiple card draws. And then on top of that, as I mentioned before, this is the card that's allowing us to warp, where it has a secondary main ability where once per turn, you could Digivolve one of your Gabumons into a Gabumon Bond of Friendship from your hand, by paying its Digivolution cost and ignoring the Digivolution requirements. And then if you do, you have to trash the top 2 cards of your security stack, and then if you have 1 or more cards in your security, then you unfortunately will have to delete the Bond of Friendship at the end of the turn. So it's still just a very powerful card to be utilizing, even though you are going to be burning yourself to security more often than not. It's still just allowing us to warp up into a very powerful Digimon to try to swing out for a game, and we don't necessarily care about our security if we're already in a winning position. So this mat is just a very powerful tamer for the deck to be using as a whole because of all of those abilities. And then there's still just a lot of tech and tools and different sub-packages that you can include in the deck to really customize it and make it your own. So you could consider utilizing the hybrid package just because we're already playing Lobomon, so we could play Strabimon to help dig out our tamers and our other hybrids. We do have a second version of Strabimon, which is really decent because it has 3k, so if we need to aggress with it, we can, and it has a play cost of 4, so it could try to dodge certain forms of removal, on top of the fact that if we are using some more hybrids, then we could use this card to be able to gain us a memory when one of our hybrids or 10 warriors attacks. We also do have another really good level 4 to consider using as a hybrid in the form of Kendo Garurumon. So Kendo Garurumon I just think is a little bit more expensive than Ikkakumon, which is why I prefer Ikkakumon, just because if the whole goal is to try to get rid of the opponent's lower level Digimon, then Ikkakumon does a little bit of a more efficient job, but Kendo is still really good bouncing them back to the hand, and he could still aggress onto the opponent at the same time. So it's just a really good card to use on top of the fact that it could also Digivolve on top of our Tamer. So if we don't see our other Lobomon, then we still have the Kendo to fall back on. But speaking of our Lobomons, we also do have another warp point that we could try to take advantage of in the deck by utilizing the promo Lobomon to use as a really solid card to warp into our Ancient Garurumon. So Ancient Garurumon is basically acting like a pseudo Bond of Friendship, where the whole idea is we're just going to warp up into this card, swing as many times as we possibly can, and then it's going to die and replace itself. So that's just making this card really good and adds extra resilience to the deck, so that way if the Digimon was going to die anyway, well, he has the on-delete ability to play a level 4 or lower blue hybrid from our hand onto the field, replacing him. So this is just another really good card and adds lots of combo potential for the deck because you could swing with this card and Digivolve up into our Bond. So there's just lots of different possibilities that you could take with the deck thanks to the Ancient package. And then we do have other cards to think about running outside of the Ancient package if you want to support more of a Rookie Rush-esque style of deck. So yes, you could play some Rookie Rush, like literal Rookie Rush cards, and play those off-color 2-drop 5Ks if you just want to try to aggress onto the opponent as hard as you can. But you also have access to cards like Madoki Betamon and Ikkakumon to try to limit some of the opponent's actions. And then we still do have more Gabumons that we could even think about running, so if you want to try to tech the deck to incorporate more source removal, then you could play the other promo Gabumon just because similar to Strabi, it could also dodge certain forms of removal while picking apart at the opponent's inheritables. And then on top of that, we do have the first starter deck at Gabumon to continuously try to pick apart the opponent's inheritables if we're going that direction. Then as far as some other off-color cards that you could use, you could consider using Mechanorimon as just a defensive card just to throw down on the field, sit on for the whole game, and hope he walls out the opponent enough where you could actually chip and aggress. So that makes him really good, being one of the best blockers in the whole game. And then on top of that, you also have Magnadramon to act as some solid recovery. So because we are going to be damaging ourselves when we warp, we want to have some way to try to keep our security healthy so we could try to actually live on the opponent's turn. And Magnadramon is one of the best cards that we have to try to recover as much as we possibly can with. And then as far as some alternative options to think about, you could consider using Forbidden Trident if you just want a really solid bounce spell tied to a DP boost effect. So it's just another really efficient card to consider, on top of the fact that we do have memory boosts we could play in the form of Howling Memory Boost to act as some solid defense and continuously try to pick apart the opponent's inheritables, on top of the delay ability to gain 2 memory at a later turn. But if we do want something to add to the consistency of the deck, then you could just play Blue Memory Boost, because digging the top 4 for any blue Digimon is just that good, on top of the delay ability to gain the 2 memory at a later turn. Then we do have various forms of removal that we could also consider adding. So we have Absolute Blast, Rattlestar, and just a slew of other more efficient removal cards for the opponent's low-level Digimon. But sometimes they also have some extra benefits, making them an even more powerful removal card than what their cost initially is. So there's just a whole bunch of these types of cards that we could play around with in blue to try to beef up our security and make it more threatening. Then on top of that, we do have the other mat. If we are going to try to take advantage of the Gabumon, and we can make a memory fixing Tamer even more efficient to hard play, which is never a bad thing, on top of the fact that if we are trying to pick apart the opponent's inheritables, we are going to be hard playing our Digimon sometimes, well, more often than not, so this card can help pick apart the opponent's inheritables as well. Then we do have some other off-color cards that we could consider running, so we could consider running a red package, just because red has lots of very powerful cards for us to be taking advantage of. So the starter deck Ikkakumon is just one of the easiest cards to just play on the field, and this is actually a really good card for aggro style decks because it's going to give all of our Digimon plus 1000 DP, ensuring that they're going to be even stronger than they normally would. And then as far as some red options you could play cards like a Delicate Plan to try to turn off the opponent's options in security, making our swings even safer than they normally would be, on top of the fact that we do have Lightning Joust to try to combo with, the fact that we're going to have low security to not only just gain some extra DP, but be able to deal some extra damage as well. And then on top of that, we do have just a slew of different red removal cards to consider thinking about to try to, again, beef up our security. So we do have Trident's Revolver, we have Gaia Force, we have Red Reamer, we have Atomic Blaster, and so much more. So red just has a slew of removal options for us to try to take advantage of if we're running a red package. And then as far as just another alternative generically good Tamer, we even have Analog Youth to try to take advantage of the fact that our bond of friendship is going to be dying. So what this card will do for the deck is we're trying to take advantage of his All Turns ability, where when a level 5 or higher Digimon dies, then we get to hatch another Digi-Egg if we don't have one already hatched, and then we get to gain a memory, and that could possibly make some very powerful turns. And then it does have an on-play ability that is adding to the overall consistency of the deck, and we do have white options that this card will allow us to use. So there's just a lot of different things that we could do based on the different types of cards that we're going to be playing. But for the most part, this is just my interpretation of a way to build the Gabumon Bond of Friendship deck as of the Classic Collection, and I think that the Gabumon Bond of Friendship deck is going to be one of the stronger decks, thanks to all of the new tech tools and possibilities that the Classic Collection actually adds to the deck, on top of all of the different ways and different tech and tools we already had to play it, making it just a very powerful deck and one of the best decks in the format. So that's all I really have for this video. As always, feel free to tell me your thoughts down in the comments below, and down in the description below are a couple of different ways you could support me and the channel. So I do have a TCG Player affiliate link, so when you use that link to buy cards off of TCG Player, then some of that money will go to supporting me and the channel. I also do make and sell playmats over on Overcard Gamers on Facebook, so when you buy a playmat with my design, then some of that money will also go to help supporting me and the channel. And on top of all of that, I do have a Twitch account over on twitch.tv/Zenitsu, so giving me a follow and a subscription also helps support me there, and I do play Digimon on top of various other games on that platform as well. So thank you everyone for watching, and as always, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more content, and I'll see you in the next video.